Hi folks, welcome to the Cannabis Corner. I'm your host, Kerry Burns. When you go to the website for the Drug Enforcement Agency, DEA.org, you kind of scroll down there a little bit, and about in the middle of the page there on the front home page, they have a question across the screen. It says, why do we need medical marijuana? Now, when I first saw this and all, I thought, wow, the DEA finally asked a question that I've been asking. Why do we have to have medical marijuana? Why don't we just legalize cannabis and make it available to anybody that uses it for whatever reason, medicinal, social, recreational, whatever? And then I looked down a little bit further, and there was the picture of this synthetic THC pill known in the United States and Germany and a few other places. They market it as Marinol. Now, this is a synthetic THC. And I can tell you from just my bleak chemistry background, from my college days and all, that the synthesis involved in producing synthetic THC is quite involved. And most of the chemicals that go into the synthesis, many of you wouldn't even recognize if the names were read out to you. And so therefore it's not really a very safe process to make this. In other words, anytime you make a pill, you have to put it in some sort of base form. And it's either in a hydrochloric acid base. A lot of pills have that HCl that follow behind them, and that's what that means. They actually had to convert it to a salt so it would exist in a solid pill form. Some are done on the other end of the pH scale, and they have a caustic type base that makes them solid and all. But this process of making synthetic THC is very involved, and it, like I said, and it uses a lot of chemicals, some that are actually carcinogenic if you're exposed to them very long. Now, I don't understand the rationale of the government. Of course, when you look at anything that they've come up with and all, it's quite hard to understand, like all the times they go against the Constitution and all that for things that, supposedly going to make our life easier and better here in this country, and that it turns out to make it worse. It's always the opposite. And when you look at the effects of Marinol, and it produces side effects that are somewhat similar to that of the THC plant in its natural form when you smoke the dried flowers. Now, THC exists in as two isomers in the plant, and the active one that most people that you hear about now is known as delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol. Now, this plant exists this THC exists in the plant as a carboxylic acid known as tetrahydrocannabinol carboxylic acid, and it's produced in the plant through a 2 or 3 stage reaction that's naturally done inside the plant. And when the compound itself becomes decarboxylated, in other words, when it starts to dry out and all, then the carboxylate portion of that is removed and it becomes THC. And this is the active component that actually gets you high and has many of the medicinal effects that people are after, and also recreational effects. Now, the difference between Marinol and natural THC is that in the natural THC, there's also present, other than the active compounds, there's also these compounds known as cannabinoids, and cannabidiols, and these are natural materials inside the cannabis, and they have a synergistic effect when you smoke the flowers or vaporize the dried flowers. The reason you get the beneficial effects of it is because you get the synergistic effect of all these cannabinoids working with the tetrahydrocannabinol. And when you take Marinol, all you're getting is the tetrahydrocannabinol portion of it, and it's missing the cannabinoids. And this causes lots of problems, and it just doesn't make any sense why you have a natural plant that produces the best THC, way better than anything synthetic, and all you got to do is take the flowers, let them dry out, and either smoke them or vaporize them, and you get the effects of it. But no, the DEA and the government claim that this pill that's produced by this nasty process and all, with all these deadly chemicals and stuff, is a better way to go. And I could not disagree more. First of all, in the history of cannabis use throughout time, nobody's ever died from using cannabis. Nobody's even ever been to the hospital and all. The synthetic variety of Marinol has caused some deaths since its inception in 1986. Now, there's been a big regulatory fight over this whole thing. I mean, in 1986, the DEA released Marinol from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 2 so it could become prescribable by the doctors. The one thing about a drug, though, under Schedule 2 or Schedule 1, which is not prescribable by doctors, but under Schedule 2, when you're a drug under Schedule 2, it can be prescribed by the doctor, but they cannot have any refills. And that's sort of where Marinol laid there for a while. Now, Marinol is known synthetically as drobabinol. It's a natural occurring substance that's in the marijuana plant, is known as drobabinol. And when they made synthetic THC, the Marinol, they sometimes refer to it as drobabinol. So if you're doing some research and all, you may want to look up at that word instead of Marinol, but both of them should give you the information. But the one thing about the Marinol, lacking these cannabinoids and the cannabidiols and all that are naturally present in the plant, you don't get the synergistic effect that you see when you smoke the dried flowers. And this is pretty much ruinous of the medicinality of this plant if you're using it for medicinal purposes. Another big problem of people who've been taking Marinol, other than those that have died, of course they don't have any problems anymore because they're laying 6 feet under, but one of the big complaints about Marinol is that the dosage is so strong that it just overwhelms the patient. And you know, any of you out there that have used cannabis dried flowers and stuff and all, you know that you don't get this effect. You take a couple of puffs off the vaporizer, a couple of puffs off the lit cannabis cigarette, and you start to feel the effects. Marinol itself, the effects of it takes over an hour after ingesting it before you start to feel the effects. And then, boom, they hit you all at once, and it's almost overwhelming. With the natural cannabis flowers, the effects are felt in as little as 5 minutes and no more than 15. And while you're actually self-administering it by either the vapors route or the smoking the joint, as they refer to in slang cannabis use, you start to feel the effects of it, and it's sort of a self-administrating alarm to you that you don't need to smoke anymore. In most cases, people, once they get the high level, ingesting more and more of it's not going to really take them to a higher level. And that's been a misnomer for a long time. Unlike alcohol, where you keep drinking it, and you get to a toxic state where it's just, wipes you completely out. The cannabis doesn't do that. You only have a certain number of specific receptor sites in the brain cells where the THC binds through a different type of chemistry going on in the brain. But basically, in the brain, when we take substances, and cannabis is unique in itself because it undergoes what is known as a retrograde neurotransmission. In most of the drugs that are taken in foods and things like that, when you have a transmission through the synapse, in other words, when the nerve ending itself sends out a signal and all, there's a chemical, what they call a neurotransmitter, that actually takes the chemical itself from one side of the nerve to the other. And it's known as a neurotransmitter. And it works right there at the synapse where two of these neurons come together. With cannabis and all, they observe, though, that the neurotransmission also works in reverse. And they've never seen that with any other compound. And therefore, they've called that retrograde transmission. And it's unique to the cannabis plant. And this is one of the reasons why you can't overdose on cannabis. It's one of the limited receptor sites absolutely do not allow any more binding of the tetrahydrocannabinol to cause an overdose. Whereas in alcohol, drugs like the opiates, heroin, different things like that, you have tremendous receptor sites, and also too, you also have a quick breakdown which allows for further intoxication and further toxicity. You can't reach that with the cannabis. Now the Marinol, lacking these cannabinoids and these natural cannabidiols and all, doesn't have the effective analgesic properties. There's chemicals in there like cannabichromines that are very, they're anti-inflammatory. They're like these omega-3s and stuff. They're very anti-inflammatory to the cell. And these aid into the pain relief and all, as do the cannabidiols and all. And none of these are present in the Marinol. So it doesn't make a lot of sense that you take a natural plant that grows anywhere, basically, and produces this plant naturally, and all you have to do is ingest the dried flowers, and you can do that through vaporization or a lit cigarette. Either way, if you like to smoke it, that's fine. And you can get all of the properties of the different cannabidiols and the cannabinoids. You don't have that in the Marinol. And the fact that the Marinol causes deaths in some cases, many people have a lot of serious side effects from it and all. It just makes sense that common sense would tell you that the natural form would be the way to go. But here, our Drug Enforcement Agency, our government, they're pushing this Marinol, which is wrong. Why would you push a substance that you know has caused death? You know it doesn't give you the full effects that the natural plant gives you and all. And all this boils down to and all is you want to control this substance so you can, basically allow the drug enforcement agencies to exist. And their entire effort, this whole war on drugs is based on this. I mean, they want to control these things so they have a job. And in the case of cannabis, this is just absolutely insane. And all of the International Narcotics Committee, the Psychotropics Committee, the Commission on Narcotics and stuff, in 1999, they moved Marinol from Schedule 2 down to Schedule 3. And that way the prescriptions could be refilled by the patients that were taking it. And yet a 2002 DEA petition that was presented to the DEA to take cannabis off the controlled substance or even move it down to Schedule 3, which would make it equal with Marinol, although the DEA has accepted it and all, they still haven't made a ruling on it and all. And pretty much the natural THC, which is the safest form, is on the most dangerous controlled category, the Schedule 1. And this just doesn't make sense. And so it goes to show you that the big farm, with their lobby and all, they know Marinol is not even near safe, doesn't have the beneficial properties that the natural plant has and all, but yet we can pass legislation that will allow it to be in Schedule 3 so it works to the benefit of the doctors and all. And this is just ludicrous. And the very fact that we ever went to the medical marijuana route in the first place has been a detriment from the beginning. It's not that it's not a wonderful medicinal drug. It is. It's a wonderful herb. And has wonderful medicinal properties. But the control and the regulation is where the problem is. And anytime you do this, not only do you get more costs and things like that, but you prevent people from actually being able to get the benefits of this. And you also prevent research, which could lead into other benefits that we don't even know about this plant yet. We're just now finding out about all the many, many benefits of how it's anti-inflammatory for multiple sclerosis patients. High doses of THC prevents Alzheimer's from occurring. There's also been studies that show that it has many, many anti-tumoral properties that actually prevent cancers from growing and in some cases has reduced a lot of different types of brain cancers and stuff. And a lot of times you hear about, when you smoke cigarettes, drink alcohol, about all the neurons and all the brain cells that you're frying every time you do that. And of course, they had that famous commercial that the drug czar William Bennett came up with that scrambled egg thing. This is your brain on drugs and all. Well, they have shown in the brain studies and all that there's actually neurogenesis occurring with the cannabinoid chemistry and all. And what this means is that it's actually generating neurons, not taking them away. It's not killing brain cells. It's actually helping bring them about. And so much of the chemistry of this in the last 10 years has taken a lot of steps toward understanding that this plant is safe and this Marinol is a joke. I mean, the fact that one person's died from it, and in the entire history of cannabis use, you never had one person die, that ought to be enough right there to take it off of the controlled substance when you look at what the effects of Marinol does. And then when you add in the fact that it really doesn't do everything it should do compared to the natural plant, well, why the hell do we have it? So every time you see something from the government, particularly in the case of the cannabis and all, most of the things that they're throwing at you are about opposite of what the truth is. And this Marinol replacement for natural THC is a perfect example of that. So I hope we've opened the eyes up to you on that. And let's push for this natural plant form. Nothing beats the natural plant. It's the easiest to control. It's the safest. Nobody dies from it. Nobody has overdose from it. It's impossible. The brain just doesn't allow it. And let's get this information out there because there's a lot of people that they don't know the truth here. And I thank you for spending time in the Cannabis Corner.